when I was 22 years old, I did something my parents had been dreaming about since before I was born. I graduated. My parents looked at this diploma and said, "Johnny, this will put food on your table." Now, let me tell you something about my parents. They weren't wrong, but they're also not asking. Because one day I've realized this is not my dream. It's theirs. And because in my family, we don't waste anything. I mean, they weren't lying. It did put food on the table, but it never made me happy eating it. I confuse proof for purpose. A wall can hold a diploma, but it can't hold a life. I am a magician. I can tell illusions when I see them, but the most dangerous illusion in the world are the ones that we're living in without us knowing. So today I'd like to reveal the 3 illusions that most of us are living in. When I was 12 years old, my parents sent me from Taiwan to Toronto, and I didn't speak a word of English. They told me I was there to find opportunity, but what I found was silence. In middle school, lunch was the hardest magic trick of all because I was the disappearing act. Every day I sit alone by myself, hoping no one would notice my accent or my lunch. And one day, I brought dumplings to school. And you know, when dumplings sit in a box for 4 hours, that smell can travel about 2 blocks away. And that was the day I got my very first nickname because all the boys all wrinkled their noses and say, "Ew, what is that? You're now gonna be Johnny Wonton Woo." I guess they know about branding. At 12 years old, that laugh lasted longer than lunch. So I stopped bringing dumplings. I stopped talking and I stopped being me. Because that made me disappear inside. Until one day, my teacher played a video of David Copperfield. And everyone gasped, everyone leaned in. And that's the very first time I saw something I desperately needed. Connection. So I called my parents and begged them, "Please send me some magic DVDs from Taiwan." And 2 months after, a yellow package arrived. I remember it smelled like home. So I practiced like crazy and I showed a trick to a classmate and he screamed. All of a sudden, I went from this invisible boy to magic man. But there's one thing that I haven't figured out yet. When people see you for your tricks, they stop seeing you. Show me a trick, not how are you. Visibility is not the same as being seen. You can win with applause, but still feel invisible. My parents didn't just want me to be successful. They had a blueprint, laid it all out for me since I was a kid. Go to America, go to a top school, get a great job, learn how Americans do business, and then come back to Taiwan and help the family business grow. It was brilliant, it was reliable, it was an efficient plan. However, there was one problem. I wasn't included. And I suspect a lot of you are nodding your heads, not because you have a family business in Taiwan, but probably because you recognize this blueprint. And here's what I found out about people who love us. They don't give us expectations. They give us maps, drawn with the best intentions to places they have been or places they wish they had gone. But the problem with someone else's map is that it doesn't show you where you are. And the funny thing about maps is that if it's drawn already, your decisions can still feel like a free choice, even when they're not. So I would like to demonstrate that for you. I've been doing this my entire career to people. If I ask you to make a move, you'll probably go with getting good grades, getting into a top school, picking the right major. After you graduate, you get a stable job, and then you make some money, you buy a house, you get married, and then you probably have kids. And after that, you work even more so you get promoted. And then when you get promoted, you work more and you make more money. This all seems like a free choice. However, if you're like me, you don't realize you're following this because this was dressed up as love. The board was set up before I even got here. The rule was written before I even started to make a move. This is not a trick. This is how love works. This is how culture works. And this is how most of us got to exactly where we are. In early 2020, I did a high-level Google event. Afterwards, a woman came up to me and she looked at me and she said, "You must have loved your job." And I told her, yes, I do. And then she said something I could never forget. She said, "I got the best school. I got the best job. My parents are proud of me. My friends are jealous of me. And I hate my life." She didn't lose. She won. She followed every single rule she's supposed to follow, and yet, somehow she ended up in the wrong life. That was a tragedy, because that win didn't feel like hers. Because that's what a rule does. A rule you didn't write can turn your whole life into training for someone else's summit. We're all training to climb Mount Everest. We suffer, we freeze, we sacrifice, we push through the storm, and we finally get to the top, to the summit. The view is breathtaking. Everyone congratulates you. And then you realize you climbed the wrong mountain. The tragedy is not winning. It's staying. Because that success looks too much to leave. Restarting is not failure. It's freedom. After several weeks, the entire world shuts down. All my events were all canceled, and overnight, just like this, my career disappeared. And I almost quit, like a lot of magicians out there. But I figured out a way. I learned lighting. I learned cameras. I built a virtual studio at home. I did 50 free test shows, sometimes even 3 shows a day, with a 1-year-old baby crying in the background. And when people saw the finished show, they loved it. But they had no idea how many hours it took for me to build that. Identity does not come in one big leap. It's small steps of courage chosen again and again until one day you look back and you realize you became someone. When I decided to pursue magic seriously, my parents weren't just unsure. They were terrified. But there was one person who didn't say no. It was the woman who would become my wife. She looked at me and she said, Johnny, give it all you've got. I believe in you. And that belief was the last magic I had left. Years after, I performed anywhere that would take me. Restaurants, weddings, corporate events, parking lots. And something started to happen. My parents' friends started to see me everywhere. On TV, on newspaper, on social media, at live events. And they started to send my parents videos. And my parents started to hear my name everywhere. One day, they cut out a newspaper article about me, and they bought tickets to come to see my show. And I remember after my show, I walked out. I saw them in the crowd. My mom had tears in her eyes. And my dad, he put his hands on my shoulders. And he said, "Son, Mom and Dad are so proud of you." Their pride wasn't the rule. That was what happened when I started to write my own. I'm not here to tell you the first step is easy, because it wasn't. But it's smaller than you think. That was my diploma. It was pressure, it was fear, it was all the expectations I thought I had to carry. But when I started to make my own story, things started to change. And something interesting happened. It became nourishment. When you learn to stop feeding into someone else's hunger, you'll start to learn to feed into your own soul. I shredded my diploma so you didn't have to. But the greatest illusion in life are not the ones on stage, but it's the ones in your head that tells you you're not enough. That tells you you have to keep performing. That tells you it's too late to start again. Most people live their life climbing someone else's mountain. Not because they're weak, but it's because they didn't realize they're following someone else's rule. So next time when you make a move, whose rule are you living by? Before you climb any higher, make sure the mountain you're climbing is actually yours. Because the one you choose is the one you get to live. I've been living my whole life in an illusion. The illusion that success is an approval. The illusion that being seen means I belong. The illusion that someone else's role was the life I had to perform. But when you see the illusions clearly, you stop performing it. And that's the moment your real life begins. Thank you.